So back near the start of the course, we learnt about variables, and we could store things like numbers, and we also learnt about input. So we could do something like this. We could say input, give me a number, and when we run this program, it'll say give me a number, and it'll store that in the variable called number. So if I say 123, for example. But one of the things we also learned is that if we check the type of that, then it's a string. So using input, regardless of what you actually type in, it stores that input as a string. So lots of us do something like this. So we could say int input, and if I run that, and now if I say 123, and we look at the type of number. So remember, number is just a variable name. It tells me that it's an integer. So we could convert that to a number. But what about if I do something like this? So if I say A, it's going to break my program, because when I try and convert A into an integer, it says, no, not doing that. So how can we get around that problem? Well, quite difficult really, because we could use string slicing to look at what's actually in that string, and we could try and work out what to do with it based on that. But a simpler thing is to use the try and except construct that Python has to trap that error and stop it from appearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that back out again. So I'm going to input that as a string, because we know that that's not going to cause an error. Whether I type in a word or a number, that's going to be okay. So how try and except works, it works like this. And it's a much more focused approach than using something like onError in Visual Basic, because that's a bit of a kind of shotgun approach. That will ignore errors. If you do onError resume next, that will ignore an error anywhere in your program. So it's a bit dangerous to use that, because it masks all sorts of problems that you might have. Whereas this is a bit more focused. So there's two bits. There's the except, the try part, and the except part. And the try part is what it tries to do. So the try part is what you want to happen if everything is working as it should. So if the user enters the right thing, what we're going to do is we're going to say number is int number. So number becomes the integer version of number, or we could also use eval or other things there. And then except is what we're going to do if that causes an error. So if trying to convert the input into a number causes an error, like the red on the right hand side there, what we're going to do instead, well, what we're going to do is we're going to print that's not a number. So it's quite straightforward. What we're going to try, well, what we're going to do, we're going to try and convert it into a number, and what we're going to do if that's causes an error. So if I run this now, it's going to ask me the question in the same way, and if I type in a number, nothing will happen. So if I type in a letter, which will have caused the error and the red text on my first version of the program, press enter, it tells me that that's not a program. No error message, so it's failed nicely, much clearer for the user. We can use that for validation. So depending on what we're actually doing, if we wanted to maybe keep repeating that, we would have different things in the try and the except section. So imagine we wanted to repeatedly ask the user for a number until we get one. So if we wanted to make sure that it was a positive number, for example, so if we're doing some validation, so we could say give me a positive number. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to make this I'm going to make number negative. I'm going to use a while loop, so I'm going to make the value of number invalid to begin with, just to make sure that the while loop runs at least once. So then I'm going to say while number is less than or equal to 0. So while it's not positive, what we're going to do is we're going to ask for the number, and then obviously we need to indent this now because it's all part of the while loop. We're going to try to convert it, and then as well as saying that's not a number, or instead of, what we could do is make sure that we ensure that the while loop goes around again. So what I could do is I could make sure that my number is less than 1, so that it definitely goes around again. So now if I run this, let's put something at the end so we can see that it's finished nicely. So print the end. So when I run this, it says give me a positive number. So it's happened at least once because I've set the number to be -1 to begin with. I'm going to say -1. Okay, so if it's not in the right range, it's asking me again. If I put in a word, it's also going to ask me again. So it's a nice way of doing your validation so that you don't get an error if you type in the incorrect information.